discretion is advised as we cover many an insane movie and numerous cult TV phenomenons. Now, are you ready to get jacked up? Are you with us? Then listen on.
And we're back with a bonus episode. We just thought we'd chime in on this breaking news. So to start this off, I got my colleague Meredith Leigh. How are you?
Good.
And Robb and Decora.
Hey,
hello. So just start us off here, Mare.
Okay, well, I guess to catch up the people that haven't really heard, but like it came out I think late last night, but the news people didn't pick it up until today that HBO Max next year is going to release like Zack Snyder's cut about it. And a Hollywood Reporter article that just came out about it today as well said that this has actually been in the works for several months. Mm-hmm. That Warner Brothers is like pouring in at least either $20 to $30 million into doing it now. So, and they're aiming for sometime next year to release on the HBO Max app, which is set to launch next week. But at the same time, it's pretty interesting considering they are releasing an edit of a movie that came out 3 years ago.
Well, yeah. I think it's always been inevitable when you see a DVD or Blu-ray release. Shout Factory and other companies have proven it is a marketable thing. People hear about all these horror stories about how producer privilege versus director privilege, and they still, at the end of the day, want to see a different cut of the movie and make up their own mind about whether the movie was a misfire or whether it was a good movie inside a few misedits, or whether it was a good movie and it misunderstood, but there's some extra added composure to it all.
Well, I think it's more than just the director's cut. This is a purely just new cut of the movie altogether, because as you know, after he left due to the unfortunate death of his daughter, they brought in Joss Whedon to completely re-edit and reshoot almost the entire. They initially said it was only going to be 20% of stuff that he needed to reshoot, but he actually reshot more than half the movie. So it became almost like a Frankenstein version of Justice League.
Yeah, it was like they decided that like I think what happened is Batman versus Superman came out, and that was right before they were going to shoot Justice League. So they were
a week before.
Yeah, and they were like, so they delayed it by a couple months because Warner Brothers went to Zack Snyder and they were like, the script you have is just. The critics are saying that it's too dark and we should try to make it a little bit lighter. And Zack Snyder was like on board with that. Like, he's like, yeah, I totally get that. And so they rewrote the script. It was one of those, it's like there was a mixture of both dark and lightness, but at the same time, it was like.
You definitely see a lot of Josh's humor in the very quieter moments, especially the opening bank robbery diffusion.
You see, I think that was one of the leftover parts from Zack Snyder. Like, it was
really?
One of those.
Okay.
It was one of those. I remember reading about like when they were sending it to like the Directors Guild and everything, and Zack Snyder in the theatrical and all the cuts that have been released so far has been credited as the sole director of it, not Josh Whedon.
He was only credited as the co-writer.
Josh Whedon. Yeah, he came in as like the co-writer. Okay. That's the only credit he has on Justice League, and I think maybe like a slight producer credit. But it's like he came in. Josh Whedon did an interview I think about a year and a half ago, and he said that he had seen like the last cut that Zack Snyder had like turned into the studio before his like weird exit from the thing. Like it's one of those. It's like.
Who's the head producer on this? Because there's like a dozen executive producers credited on this whole thing, and who's the one who was calling the shots, who made the bad decision to say, "Hey, let's get the."
That was Kevin. I have no idea how to pronounce his last name, but that was Kevin Tejura, so I believe it was left to Kevin. I have no idea how to pronounce his last name, but he was the one who came in and was like, and Toby Emmerich who came in was like, yeah,
Yeah.
you gotta do this and you gotta do that because this is too dark, not, the people don't like this, and he was like, okay, fine, whatever,
Yeah.
he
Well,
did,
one of the
did it. Okay.
That's what's weird. This one gets railed on a lot. I think this personally is my favorite of these new DC movies, but that's just me.
like it's not a terrible movie. Like the theatrical cut, like it's one of those. It's like, I mean, I like it's not terrible. Like it's a good change of pace, and I think that's because like Josh Whedon came in just to like bump up the humor a little bit, but at the same time, it's
Yes.
like, what's funny is that like Release the Snyder Cut has been like this ghost in like the in like the
the web.
on the web.
Yeah.
Like you just see like it pops up in like the most random posts. Like someone will post on Twitter like OMG my grandfather RIP, and then someone will underneath will type in like Release the Snyder Cut, and you're like, dude. And so
It is funny how we're in this new day and age because Warner Brothers had so many box office bombs back in the 90s through today, and they would always just say, hey, we're going to make our money back on HBO. And so now we're in a streaming age, and so this is basically an added content. It's like you're getting all this exclusive other stuff, kind of like on Disney Plus, where it would have the trailer and exclusive making of stuff for Avengers stuff, which isn't on any of the Blu-rays.
well,
So it's kind of like
some
this
of it is on the Blu-rays, but like some of it has been made more for the exclusive thing.
Oh,
And I think one of the
well, that's
reasons
kind of what I'm
why
getting
Warner Brothers has decided to like proceed with the Zack Snyder and how they said that like they're like, if this has to be like a 6-hour miniseries, that's fine. If this gets to be like a 4-hour cut, that's fine. Because I think what happened was, I think when Avengers Endgame came out, that kind of like changed the game per se, because that the movie itself is like 3 hours and 2 minutes long,
Mhm.
and it was one of the top releases of last year. So all of a sudden, studio executives are like, audiences are perfectly okay if a superhero movie has to be 3 hours long, as seen by how much money Endgame came up with.
Yeah.
But I think what's funny is,
they were always in denial about it because like they just weren't looking at the numbers. Like Lord of the Rings made bank, that's a 3-hour movie, and they were just always hesitant. They weren't willing to pull that trigger, and it's like you might as well pull the trigger. People will stick around if they love what's on screen.
Yeah,
Right.
it's one of those. It's like if the well, I think the thing with Endgame was that they knew this was 10 years and like 20 movies worth of material, like sort of being tied up with a nice bow, and they realized that they couldn't do this in just like barely like under 2 hours. So all of a sudden they were like, okay, we got to go 3 hours if we have to. And so while they produced a 3 hour cut, they were still kind of nervous, but at the same time, like when it became clear that this was making a lot of money, they were like, okay, yeah, this is totally good. I think the thing with that, with like at least with the DC like movie universe, is that I think I think one of the reasons why Marvel had the success with it was because um like because they had all these movies like planned out pretty much from the beginning. Like they like movies in like 2010, they were like, okay, we need to have at least the first draft of this movie that's not scheduled to come out until like 8 years from now ready. Like that way we can at least start storyboarding and everything. And I think the problem with the DC universe is that there isn't like a writer's room per se. It's like Marvel, it was like everybody sort of had like their own take on it, but at the same time, they were working side by side with the other people. And I think what happened was uh, they let Nolan like play with his Batman movies separately, and then after he was finished, they were like, "Crap, we got to catch up, so we're just gonna restart everything." And then they forgot to like make the people like work side by side. They just sort of they were like, "Yeah, just go work your own thing," and then all of a sudden they're like, "Why does nobody like these movies except for Wonder Woman? Why is that?" But
It's because people are biased. But I'm
No,
gonna let you have this one, or Rob.
it's mostly that they gave Snyder complete control, and Snyder has this kind of, he has a vision that can be considered divisive. Like he likes playing with things. You know what I'm saying? He likes like looking at these superheroes from a different perspective. As with Marvel, you're looking at them in a from a perspective where it's like where we're used to as like children, where it's like Saturday morning cartoons, and it kind of plays to that level, like just grown up Saturday morning cartoons. Whereas Snyder's vision is a lot darker.
We'll return after these messages.
Hey, feeling down? Feeling low? Not enough podcasts about movies in your life? Why not try
They must be destroyed on sight.
the new podcast cure-all, sure to get you right with the world and on a path to better living. We have exploitation, we have Italian horror, we have zombies, we have slashers, we have crime films, we have spaghetti westerns, we even have sci-fi and sex comedies. So take a dose of
They must be destroyed on sight.
as needed, and let the hosts, Lee Russell, Daniel Harper, Paul Romali, and the odd guest host cure what ails you.
Warning, may cause atrophy, African consumption, black fever, bone shave, chin cough, colic, cramp colic, dropsy of the brain, elephantitis, grocer's itch, jaundice, mania, miasma, mortification, palsy, Pott's disease, rheumatism, scurvy, St. Anthony's fire, summer complaint, and worm fit in some people. Consult a physician before listening.
Hey, I heard you like movies.
I heard you like to hustle.
I heard you like podcasts.
Well, guess what?
There's a podcast for you out there called The Home Video Hustle.
Damn right.
Every Friday, we talk about whatever movie PJ picks out the bag. What does that mean? Every Wednesday on our YouTube page, I put a bunch of movies in a bag, and PJ picks one out at random. And then we just watch it. We talk about it for maybe like an hour, hour and a half, 2 hours, whatever we feel like doing, wherever the conversation leads us.
But do we actually talk about the movie?
Most of the time. Tangents galore.
Yes.
So believe me, we may be a movie podcast, but it's not always about movies. We may talk about video games, music. Yeah, that's the big one, music. Sometimes we might get a little bit of politicalness in there.
Yes.
Sometimes we may just, we know what we like to do. We like to tell stories, PJ.
Yes.
I am the master storyteller
Yes.
of the podcast realm. Undefeated. So if you like to hear about movies, video games, whatever foolishness comes to our mind, the most random stuff you could think of, check out the Home Video Hustle. You can find us on the Stitchers,
Yes.
the Google Play,
Yes.
Apple Podcasts,
What else?
Podbean,
What else?
Podcast Addict,
Goddamn.
all that. Ain't no reason you can't get your hustle on. We everywhere, worldwide, baby.
Hustle, motherfucking hustle.
Hey, we can't cuss in the promo, PJ. We
Ah.
gotta be family friendly. There may be podcasts out there that don't want his hair say
Ah. Ah.
all
Yeah.
that good fun stuff.
Well, you.
Yeah. don't run the listeners away, PJ.
I'm sorry.
But this is going kind of long.
Yes.
So we'll end this and say, hey, check out the Home Video Hustle every Friday on all the various podcast outlets. Peace.
Peace.
As far back as I can remember, I always wanted to be a gangster. And while Witch didn't make it to the top of the world, he did make the Gangs of Hollywood podcast. So join the gang and enjoy a movie review podcast about movie gangs, gangsters, mobsters, and the mayhem they cause. You can find GOH Podcast on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at GOH Pod at www.gohpod.com, as well as your favorite podcast listening app. And remember, say hello to your little friend for me.
If you take two old punk rockers who are past their prime, put them in front of a movie screen and give them a podcast, what do you get? Cinema Punks. Cinepunks. It's the mixtape of movies.
Did you ever see a film at such a young age it left you traumatized with cinematic wounds? Necrophilia. It's a dead issue, man. Don't push it. Cinema Psyops is a weekly podcast documenting an ongoing experiment on the mind of an unwilling test subject.
No one should have to watch this movie.
Oh, no one should have to watch this.
No one should have to watch this movie.
Surprisingly, it's not a topic that a lot of people really want to tackle.
I'm shocked, prudes.
I know, really.
Right?
It's the next sexual frontier that no one wants to explore.
I am, in the most sincerest of senses, disappointed in you.
It takes a powerful goddess like Connie, jam her arm down the monster's throat and kill it. Oh, I'm still tripping out over that. Even as a kid, I was like, I gotta find a girl like that. Every week, I get a new look of disappointment that I never thought I could get out of her.
Unimaginable. At 12 years old, you should not be watching this movie.
Obviously.
At 13, you should not be. 14, you shouldn't be. I'm not entirely sure even 17-year-olds should be watching this.
Just because you're offended by something doesn't mean that you have the right to demand that it doesn't exist. Watching this film again, I had all of this like little nerd glee with everything that kept
little
popping
history all popping up
absolutely.
at you.
So I totally loved this film.
Hey, I know why you couldn't see that. It's because your brain's warped from watching this shit at 12 years old.
Yeah, this is a rough movie. I told you ahead of time when we were getting ready to do it that it was.
How
be a
could you
rough
watch
one.
this shit at 12?
Because physical wounds heal, cinematic ones don't. Listen to Cinema Psyops.
It's time, let's check our cue, baby. Pair it with a couple brews, baby. We love good movies. We love the bad ones too. So we watch them all and pass their lessons on to you. Oh yeah. Everything I learned from movies helps to make life a little bit groovy. Whether one last plot holes or gratuitous movies, it's time to get busy with your friend Steve and Izzy at eilfm.podbean.com.
We now continue with our program.
You know, he likes playing with the reality of the situation that, you know, if superheroes existed, this is how it would be. You know, it goes all the way back to his Watchmen. You know what I'm saying? He loved Watchmen. He loves Dark Knight Returns. Obviously, that shows him Batman v Superman. And he likes looking at it from that version. And it's like, you know, I myself love that kind of vision, but a lot of people didn't, you know, because they want to see the characters they grew up with, but as, you know, from like a childlike perspective, you know what I'm saying? Like, you know, they still want to see the Saturday morning cartoon version of these characters, but he's looking at it from a grown-up's perspective, and that's where the division comes in between the fandom. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Well, the thing I kind of like, you know, I saw Batman versus Superman. Growing up, I love Batman. I love all this stuff, and I saw Batman versus Superman, and I loved like this. I love the human take he had on him. And I think, personally, I think so far, Ben Affleck is one of the best actors to have ever played, Bruce Wayne / Batman, because he understands that darkness. He had that darkness. This is a man who is haunted by his past, and yet at the same time, overcomes this like dark view he's had of the world to see the goodness in Batman versus Superman. And one of the things that I kind of loved was that was the climax at the end, when there's the scene where where Superman thinks that Batman is about to kill him, and his only request, like, he doesn't beg for his life or anything, he's just like, save Martha, and then all of a sudden that triggers Batman's PTSD. And yet almost everybody I've met who discussing about this, they start making fun. They're like, oh, save Martha. I'm like, you guys, this
that boggles my mind.
He saw his parents shot in front of him when he was like 10. Of course he would have this as a trigger.
Well, and we get that all these superhero movies are going to have implausible moments, because that's just part of the comic book thing. It works for a comic book movie, but everyone wants to make it a bigger deal. Oh, it doesn't work as a movie. I'm like, well, it's a comic book movie. So if you can handle the plot twist in Iron Man 3, if you can handle all these other plot twists about Black Widow and Captain America, I think you can handle a Batman or Superman twist. But that's just me.
I think you can handle the fact that Batman, a man who has for like 80 years dressed up as a bat in order to avenge his parents, that quite maybe he also has some, I don't know, PTSD going on.
Yes.
I mean, he dresses up like a bat to protect, to avenge his parents.
And surprisingly, he's not towards the point of being a sociopath. He's just a guy who's just madly wants to get rid of any just imbecile
But that's the
crime wave.
but that's the beauty of Batman v Superman is that like when you look at Burton's Batman movies, Batman is killing people almost with like especially in
No
Batman Returns,
remorse.
he shoves the fucking bomb in the dude's pants and then smiles at him before punching him into the gutter and the dude exploding. Like,
You're
and
right.
it's just it's a cool moment. It's a cool
Yeah, well,
moment.
like even
but
Affleck's Batman, he shoots a he has like a gun turret, like a machine gun on his like bat plane, and he like shoots it into a bunch of like he shoots it at a like at the building that's holding Martha Kent hostage, and it was like, well, he's probably clearly killed at least one person with that.
He's testing it out on somebody.
Like in the comics, Batman's like, no, I'm not gonna kill anybody unless I absolutely have to, and then at the same time, it's like, I gotta go back to work. Yeah,
Right.
it's like that.
But the beauty of Zack Snyder is that he gives you a reason why Batman is doing that because he's so far down the totem pole as far as like his faith in humanity is that he just no longer cares, and that it's not like he's not like realistically looking to seek out people to kill. Like if it is, he's just going out there with a fucking machine gun like the Punisher and just murdering everybody. But it's more like they're just collateral damage where it's like, well, if you weren't there, you wouldn't be dead by now. It's like, and like from the beginning, he's trying to condone his actions, even when Alfred comes up to him like, oh, this is what we're doing now, and he's like, oh, this is what we've always done. Nothing's changed. And Alfred notices like, no, everything has changed. You know what I'm saying? Like, you're different now. And Bruce can't see it, and he's going so far down. It's like he's the living embodiment of Harvey Dent's line in his motto in The Dark Knight, where you either die a hero or you live long enough to see yourself become the villain. Batman is the villain of this confrontation between him and Superman. He just doesn't realize it. Like it's perfectly visualized in the scene where it's perfectly visual.
It's not blinded by anger per se, but it's more like he sees. It's one of those. It's like he sees all these people, worshiping, Superman, and he's just kind of like, do they not realize that that Superman has all these powers and everything? And well, they like show it at the beginning of the of Batman versus Superman, where it takes place during the climax of Man of Steel, and so Superman is fighting with Zod, and meanwhile Bruce Wayne is like flying over to Metropolis, and he's like trying to call all of the people that are at like the Metropolis branch of Wayne Corp, and he's like, yeah, it's one of those. It's like he's like, this person can turn on us at any moment. We need to take out the threat before it becomes a threat. That's how he's like in Batman versus Superman. But then he realizes, like at the end of it, he's like, well, he could have been a threat, and he knows he could have been a threat, but he decided not to be a threat because he was raised as a human for the most part.
Well, the best heroes end up, they're not going to see the whole big picture entirely. They're just, it also, just like that makes them more human because, just go back to multitasking. Wherever your mind is at that very moment determines how much interest or just your main frame of your mind is at that moment. So let's say all these heroes are on a battlefield. Some of them are more concerned about protecting everybody. Some of them are more concerned about eliminating the threat. Batman's, I think, main issue is just keeping him out of the loop immediately makes you an enemy of his. And when he feels like he's been backstabbed or even it feels like a greater evil is brewing, he wants to be in control of the whole thing. And I thought that was brilliant casting in and of itself of Ben Affleck, because he already shown himself he could be a pretty cool filmmaker, and he was already an actor who wanted to be in control of every scene. So I thought it was good that they went to that particular conflict. And yet so many people are, again, just bashing this movie. And I'm like, if you can handle Captain America, Tony Stark, and, all the other Avengers fighting each other, over different politics. I think you can handle these guys.
So the thing I'm worried about is that like Joe Manganiello showed
I
up.
thought it was Mina Jello.
I have no idea.
It's a very weird Italian name.
So he shows up in like the post credits scene as Slade Wilson / Deathstroke, and it's one of those. It's like, the scene is literally about a minute long, but I guess in the Snyder cut, it's more like 20 minutes long, or even like he's part of like one of the B or C plots or something like that, because he spent a lot of time working on this movie. And the thing I'm worried about is that all these people have been like, they've sort of been like counting their eggs before they hatch, so it's like they've been praising this movie, like they're like, oh, this is the Snyder cut is probably so much more better than the Whedon cut that we got, ew, gross. And Joe was asked about this at like a Comic-Con about a year ago. They were like, hey, how was it like working on like Justice League? And Joe was just kind of like, I mean, one of these days I'm gonna have to sit down and write a book about it. And everybody's like, what? And he was like, he was just like, oh. And so apparently, so for me, it's like, we thought that, Warner Brothers was, doing all these reshoots, but at the same time, for all we know, the Snyder cut could be absolutely terrible. Like just one of the worst movies, like Geely, terrible. And I would hate for Ben Affleck to like undergo that again.
I don't think I'd go that far.
To be fair,
I mean, he hasn't disappointed me yet.
Geely,
I mean,
the script that Ben Affleck started shooting the movie
was a dark comedy.
Was actually apparently very good. It's just about halfway through it, the studio was like, hey, apparently Ben Affleck and Jennifer Lopez are hooking up. They're going to be a hot item come next fall, so let's just reshoot the entire movie. And then when the final product came out, they were like, Jesus Christ on a stick, this is terrible. So, I mean, I would hate for Ben Affleck to get that again after all the, like, strides he has made, like, trying to restore himself. But at the same time, it's like, to be fair, you did sign up for Batman, and this was one of the reasons why you left, was because you got too involved in the role.
I just want them to do different versions of DC, but I don't want them to keep rebooting it. Like, it was cool that they did, Harley Quinn, but they didn't do the whole, they can't keep remaking or having different people portray it. They likely will, but I think they should just keep adapting stories that haven't been told yet.
Okay, so I saw Harley Quinn opening weekend, and it was part of like this weird promotion thing at AMC. Me and my friend found out that it would be cheaper to see it in IMAX than in the regular, so we saw it in IMAX. And long story short, we saw like the first 15 minutes of the new Christopher Nolan movie. So that was just like the cherry on top of this very delicious ice cream we got to enjoy. And it was good because it was like everybody who was involved in the picture understood Harley. And I mean, I remember Kevin Smith talking about it, where he said that he felt like the Harley Quinn movie like didn't have to be R. Like, he was like, they could have just like bleeped out some of the F-bombs or something like that, and it still would have passed with a PG-13. And while I think that's happening, at the same time, it's like, it's still a good movie.
They make a big deal about R-rated versus PG-13. It doesn't make any difference to me, especially when half the movies have an unrated cut. I'm just like, okay.
Like, it was one of those movies where me and my friend, we saw it and we were like, we honestly thought it was PG-13. Like, the violence was just like tame enough, but at the same I was like, I saw more violent stuff in the PG-13 cut of Batman versus Superman. And but then it's like, no, it's like they had to intentionally be R-rated by having Harley Quinn like drop an F-bomb every other word. And I was like, she could have dropped one F-bomb like at like the climax, and it would have been perfect and it would have killed. But at the same time, it's like, I feel sorry because,
they're gonna take kids to this anyway, so what does it matter?
Margot Robbie poured her heart and soul into this character, and it got screwed because it came out during Valentine's Day. And at the same time, you remember that's less than a month before COVID happened. So
Mhm.
any like money it would have made, like extra money it would have made, it just all of a sudden they had to go straight to digital. And personally, I also think that maybe like DC, like instead of having these huge tent poles and everything, they know that they found success like on TV regarding like their characters and such, especially like Doom Patrol. But
Right.
at the same time, I think maybe some of the bigger stuff they should aim for like a mini series or something like that. Like I
Something.
would just like I told Cameron earlier today, like what when I heard, oh, they're thinking of maybe doing like a 6-hour miniseries or something like that, and I was like, I told him I could just imagine like, so they release it as a miniseries. It has some of the highest ratings known to man. That to the point where they're like when Big Little Lies came out, and they're like, well, we're gonna have to do a second season of this, and so all of a sudden Ben Affleck returns as Batman for the second season, and Robert Pattinson is just sitting there and he's all like, does that mean I could go do weird ass indie movies now? So anyway, so all of a sudden the twist becomes that it becomes like they just start doing like a Batman miniseries, and they have to do Under the Red Hood, and all of a sudden Robert Pattinson shows up as Jason Todd, and I would just be like, oh my god, can you imagine that weird twist?
They still need to get what's his name from Supernatural, who wants to do it.
Yeah, who wants
Jensen
photo
Ackles.
shoot of him as the character and has already voiced the character in an animated movie. So like he did an exact photo shoot, like drive out to like the nearest train tracks and pose with spray painted guns photo shoot of him as Jason Todd. I think the problem is if they were to do that, there would be kind of like the age thing would be weird, because he's older than Robert Pattinson, but at the same time, Ben Affleck is like only like 3 years older than him or something like that, and so it'd be one of those you're like, wait a second. So yeah. So I'm excited, but at the same time, I'm like cautiously excited. Like I'm not planning on it to be like this brilliant, masterpiece of cinema. So it's one of those. I'm like, I
But
feel like
you love how people can't even describe what they want in it. They're just like, oh, for a while there was people, they were like, we wanted to be like Christopher Nolan. Now there's a lot of people saying, oh, I thought Dark Knight was overrated, so I don't want it to be like that. I'm like, so what do you want it to be like?
Yeah, it's
Let
like
the director or producer pick a style and just go for it.
my favorite thing is that apparently Zack Snyder has come out and said that he hasn't seen Whedon's cut. And I can understand that, but at the same time, I'm like, I feel
Great
like
minds think alike, and
I feel like you should watch the cut. That way, it could be like, well, I don't want my movie to end up like that, because what if it's just literally that just is like the only thing that it turns out that the only thing that Whedon added was like Barry Allen acting like Barry Allen. So
many filmmakers are always kind of getting, if they're not getting jealous, then they're afraid that they will start copying other styles and not be their own person. But it doesn't hurt to just supervise and look at it. I mean, I'm taking Ron Howard's
No, I know his son has watched it. His son Eli has watched it, and I think his wife Deborah watched it. So I think he knows enough about what happened in the movie to know that yeah, this is not something that I want to watch. I know on Vero, like people ask him like, oh, what was the meaning of the Russian family? And he's like, what Russian family? And it's like, and they explained it to him, and he was just like, oh, like,
yeah, he's just like, I'm not sure what you're talking about, lady. And
yeah.
it's like the Russian family in Justice League, and they're like, and he's just kind of like,
yeah, he's like, what the?
There's a Russian family now. What is this?
Yeah, and then they asking him about the significance of like the roots coming out during the climate. He said, I have no idea what the fuck those are. Like, you don't ask me.
Like,
I don't know what they did.
Like, if I was in Zack Snyder's like shoes right now, and I kept hearing this stuff, I would just, it would probably be one of those where I would like publicly deny that I haven't seen it, but at the same time, I would like be like hate watching it like every day, just be like, ah, I can't believe what they did to my baby, and then it's like,
Right. I know his son publicly said that that he went and he saw it and he was like, yeah, they fucked it up. And it's just, with that, I think it's just painful for him, because it, he was something he worked really hard on, to conceptualizing this
He's
whole
too close to
thing.
it.
Yeah, and then
Okay,
like, he has this unfortunate tragedy during, the post production of it. So he leaves, they take it, and then they just completely just do whatever with it. So it's kind of like, it's like, it's just too painful a thing to relive, especially when you knew that, what they did with your film, what I'm saying, something you work hard on, in
so
your
the thing
mind, they
I heard
completely
about
destroyed it.
his sorry to interrupt. The thing I heard about his exit was that, like, I've heard different things about his exit. Like, I heard like, the studio allowed him to step away, but then I also heard that, like, when the studio told him you can't turn in a 4-hour cut, nobody's gonna want to see a 4-hour superhero movie. He turned in like a 2-hour and 30-minute cut of it, and it was just so bad that the studio was like, "You're off the project immediately."
I don't know how much I believe that, because
But
these
then
are
they
the
let
same
him use his
executives who
daughter's death
gave.
as like a reason to leave. Like, they just they met with him and they're like, you know what? If you want to say that you left because of this personal tragedy, go ahead and say it. I have found it
Right.
interesting that apparently, when the last day that he was on Warner Brothers lot, he just literally took the hard drive that the original cut was on
Yeah.
and just left with it. And it's literally been in his house, like in his living room. Like, how many keys have been thrown on it or covered up by all this different paper, and you're just like, and it's literally been right there. Like, I am surprised that he hasn't like tried to leak it onto the internet. Instead, he's just doing like the black and white stills that he's taken throughout the project.
Something.
Right.
I think they just need to release all 3 cuts of this damn thing and let the viewer decide what's the superior cut, because those always make for great articles years later.
But that's the thing, because there's the theatrical cut, there's the cut he turned in, and then there's going to be this new alternative cut, which is I believe is going to be closer to the version he scripted, that him and Chris Terrio scripted before Warner Brothers asked him to make alterations to it after the reception of Batman v Superman. So like, that's where the 20 million comes in, because they're asking him to, add, since you guys want to see the Snyder cut, you're going to see the Snyder cut, the version that I originally had planned, before they said, nah, change this, do that, make it more fun, and they said, okay. But then it's like, oh, this is a fun Zack Snyder movie,
And
and
it's funny, you said the producer, I think I found the name of him, Kevin Susihara. Is that the
yeah,
one
something
name?
like that. Yeah.
Okay, so he's the one Wikipedia is citing as who ordered the movie be 2 hours.
Yes.
And so far, it looks like he's under allegations for
Yeah, he's
basically
gone. He's
doing
gone. He's gone.
it.
Thank
Is
God.
he?
He's gone.
Yeah, well, apparently
Oh, he's resigned. Okay.
Emmerich was the one who last fall, like, on like literally the second anniversary when Release the Snyder Cut was trending, he like called up Zack Snyder and he was like, "Hey, you know what? What if we actually like did this as a thing?"
Right.
And Zack Snyder was like, "Are you serious?" And he was like, "Yeah," because I think at that point they were planning on the streaming service, and I guess they initially thought, "Oh, well, we're just gonna like, you know, use the CGI and everything, and then have it there at launch." But COVID pushed it back, and so it was like, so the article I read is that it's like they haven't really even started like the post production stuff on it. They've just like all that's happened is that they showed it to like the HBO Max executives, and because apparently Snyder has been showing this around town for a few years, just like it's always been like, oh, you like, it's always been just secret stuff like, hey, show up to this one theater in Los Angeles at like 10 o'clock on a Saturday, like leave your phone at home, and you go in and you get to see him like talk about this cut, and he shows footage of it and everything. But I don't know. I feel like what I found funny is, you see, I only found out that this was actually going to be a thing when I like did my, woke up and checked Instagram for the day, and the first thing that popped up was Jason Momoa's post about it. And at first I was like, is this even a real thing? Because this year has been so crazy already. I was just like, this is a joke for all I know. And then I had to Google it, and it was like, nope, apparently they're releasing the Snyder Cut.
I was actually watching the stream where he announced it. It was on Vero. It was a Man of Steel watch party, and he was providing live commentary over Man of Steel. And then at the end, Henry Cavill came into the stream. Yeah, he came into the to the stream, and then they invited fans, and then they allowed them to ask questions, and then at the very end he revealed that the official title, Zack Snyder's Justice League, was coming in 2021. That's why I got I actually posted it on my Facebook. The screenshot was my personal screenshot, because I screenshotted it where he turned the camera around to show that the poster art for it. So yeah, I've been following the Snyder Cut thing for a while myself, because I was I don't think the theatrical cut is terrible at all. To be honest, I actually enjoyed the theatrical cut of Justice League more than Avengers Infinity War, which shows how much I enjoyed Infinity War.
I feel like it was one of those like impossible tasks. Like they got the person who, like, because Josh Whedon, like before Buffy and everything, had been known as a script doctor, and it was one of those. Yeah. He's like, if you ever listen to the way he talked about his like 3 weeks that he worked on Waterworld before he left.
Oh yeah. And Speed is his best movie. I'm sorry, he wrote all the dialogue of that. He gets points.
Yeah, so it's one of those. It's like he was known for a script doctor, but then he went and he made this career, doing these like cult TV shows. So it made sense for like Warner Brothers to be like, you need to come in and like fix this for us. And he probably thought, oh, it's going to be one of those uncredited, I just add a couple pages in and everything. Because the story about him, apparently he worked on the first X-Men movie, and
you're a dick.
Yeah, yeah. Well, also it's like, what happens when a frog gets struck by lightning? The same as everything else. He says those are the only 2 lines of his script that like remained, and it was just like, but he had like this impossible task of like Warner Brothers like forced him to watch the cut that Snyder turned in, and so he was like, crap, I'm gonna have to redo at least almost all of this. And then they're like, oh, by the way, make sure that the cut is no longer than 2 hours long. So then he's just there in like the editing bay, just like, oh my god, I'm gonna have to cut so much stuff. And try to like, basically he got a already finished puzzle, and then Warner Brothers like slapped part of it away and said, try to make this look complete by tomorrow. And so it's like, okay, looks like I'm doing all these all-nighters, better take out the Red Bull. And
that's the thing. I've seen some reviews. They always go for the easy stuff. The minute they hear a backstory, they always use that in the review. I couldn't tell any real scene where it seemed like any filmmakers were battling over the, it didn't feel like there were too many apparent reshoots. And I got that with, Bohemian Rhapsody.
Oh, I could tell.
You could? Is that Henry?
Yeah.
Henry, a lot of Henry Cavill scenes, you could tell those were the reshoots just because of the mustache. About it. Yeah. Like, I just loved it. Paramount said, no, you can't like pay us to like, you can't, like, Warner Brothers, I heard like upwards of $20 million to Paramount just to be like, look, you're letting him come back, but he needs to save the mustache. And they're like, no, this is an important part of the story. And it's like, He played no part in the story whatsoever.
No.
And the crazy thing is that Christopher McQuarrie, the director of Mission Impossible Fallout, was like, okay, no problem. I don't care. You know, he could shave
Studio
it. And
had a
it was
problem.
Paramount. It was Paramount that was
I
like,
can
no,
literally
he
see
can't
like
shave it.
Henry Cavill there, like on the phone with his like agent, like with like somebody higher up, and he has like the razor in one hand and the phone in the other. He's like, "Tell me what I'm supposed to do with my facial hair. Like, do you want me to shave? Do you not? What is this? Screw it! I'm gonna go do a Witcher TV show."
The funny thing is, I actually know someone who worked at one of the visual effects houses that worked on removing the mustache, especially for the opening scene with the cell phone footage.
Yeah,
And
which you could tell was
I-
just absolutely fake.
yes. That's the part where it's the most noticeable because it looks like he got like his mouth is swollen, like he got stung in the fucking face by a bee. And I know a guy who was actually one of the part of the effects houses. He's in a Facebook group and I spoke to him, and he said that they worked like almost like day and night to get it to look as realistic as possible, and they just didn't have enough time. And
Yeah, it was like one of these things where they were like, where I think the visual effects people told Warner Brothers they were like, if you could push this back by a few months, you know, this could totally be done. And Warner Brothers was like, no, it's coming out in November with or without a mustache, but preferably without. And so they're like, well, this isn't gonna look realistic then. And Warner Brothers was like, don't care, go do your job.
But regarding that opening scene, you know what I'm saying, they were like, we can't get this, you know, to look realistic in the time you've given us. So Warner Brothers actually considered cutting that scene. It was like, oh, you could take it out. It was Joss Whedon, the one who was like, no, the scene stays in. You know, he fought for that scene to stay in, knowing it looked like shit, and he still fought for it to stay in. And that's why you have that awful scene. So it's like, he's partial to blame. He's not fully to blame for how the film turned out, but he's partial, you know, in the fact that
the reasoning behind that scene because, as I recall, it was just it was one of those. It's like we had never really seen, like we saw like some of the media and Batman versus Superman's like take on everything, but at the same time, it was like you never really saw like it's literally a little kid asking Superman these questions, and so it's like you see it's a different perspective on how like a little kid would see Superman be like. And I mean, we kind of got a little bit of that in
Shazam, yeah.
Shazam,
I mean, the whole
yeah.
entirety of Shazam is pretty much that, yeah.
Of course, the thing I felt sorry for Shazam was that the final scene, there's like a scene where like Billy has transformed into Zachary Levi's character and he's sitting with his best friend in the lunchroom. And they're like, "Oh, we have a very special guest coming to have lunch with us." And
I'm just glad
he turns
that movie
around and
did
it's
well.
and it's a Superman, but you can tell it's clearly a body double.
Yeah,
because you never see below the neck, like you never see above the neck, like those old like.
Couldn't afford them.
No, from what I understood, it was like there was like some scheduled in issue with Warner Brothers about that.
Oh, God.
Like they were like Henry Cavill needs to fly out to Vancouver for this one day, and I think Henry Cavill was stuck on the Mission Impossible set, and he was like, I cannot physically be able to get there in the time frame that you're giving me. Like if you want me to wait, if you want to wait another week, I can fly in real fast and do it, and then fly back to New Zealand. But Warner Brothers was like, it's either now or never, Cavill. So
nice.
So
and I know, and I think that not to interrupt you, but I think that also he has one film left on his contract with Warner Brothers playing Superman, and he didn't want to waste it on a cameo appearance in Shazam, and wanted to save it for like a more, you know, like a more solid leading Superman role. So I think that also played a role in him not appearing in Shazam.
Well, you know what's funny is that I think it was what's funny is apparently Chris Evans, like when he did Marvel, he signed up for like he did I think he did like the 9 movie contract, and I think if you like counted like even some of the films where he appeared like for the last minute and everything. So it was one of those that was like, I think he very quickly hit the number of movies that he was contracted to. So it got to the point where it's like with Robert Downey Jr. Robert Downey Jr. was only contracted for what, like 6 films initially, and then it was like by the time Captain America Civil War hit, he was that was going to be like his final film, so they had to switch to like a especially with the other Marvel people, they had to switch to like a film by film basis. Like I know with Scarlett Johansson, like she was only signed up for like 3 films, and that came and went with Winter Soldier, but then it was one of those that was like every time they would re-sign the contract, she would always add in the note that they were legally supposed to make a Black Widow movie before this certain year. And so that's when when they were doing the final negotiations for Infinity War and Endgame, that's when she came in and she's like, look, either you promise to make this film in between this time period or around the same time as this, or I'm walking. And she knew that Marvel at least wasn't going to let her walk without doing the Black Widow movie. So yeah, it's interesting to see how different studios are like dealing with this stuff.
When I talked to Director Chaos, he talked a lot about how studios are very shitty about determining an actor's net worth.
Yeah.
Because we like to associate filmmakers as you're only as good as your last film, but they're instantly looking at the return and they're always instantly assuming, oh, that film did well because those first 5 people were in it. We want them on this movie. Oh, their last movie did bad. Fuck them. We don't want them.
Well, I think the thing is that I feel like it's either going to come sooner rather than later, where DC is going to have to take a very like deep look at like at the DC, well, not Warner Brothers is going to have to take a look at their DC universe and be like, okay, which stuff are we going to like which stuff do we want to move forward with, and which stuff should we just throw in the trash right now? Because they have like a trillion projects, but like I have been waiting for a Flash movie since I was in middle school.
Really?
And it seems like every year, it was like, at least since Ezra Miller got cast, it was like every year they would always be like, oh, we're going to start filming in the fall. And then
not John Delaney.
Yeah, it was like John Mulaney. Yeah, it was like,
he looks like me.
It would literally, they would like, the last time I had heard was that Ezra Miller had gotten so tired of like these directors coming and going and everything that he had like written his own script, and he literally told Warner Brothers, if you don't like take this script, if you don't do the script, I'm gonna leave, because it had literally been one of those films where it's like he's had to turn down roles because, you know, they're like, hey, we're going to be filming in 3 months, you better get ready. And then like a month before they're supposed to start filming, they're like, oh, we want to mess around with it a little bit. So,
right.
I mean, I still think he's attached to the role because he did like show up in the CW like Crisis on Infinite Earth thing.
Yeah.
I was so surprised by him showing up. They did a good job of
Let
keeping
alone
that
Birds
down.
of Prey cameo from Ashley Scott. I did not expect that.
Yeah, or the Tom Welling cameo as well.
I was expecting that because you had kind of told me about that, but it was cool that they actually went ahead with that, and let alone went and gave Brandon Routh. It's like he's playing multiple
characters.
He's
playing Superman as well. And I was like, okay, everybody's. I did remember hearing that apparently they did offer a cameo to Nicolas Cage. Nicolas Cage was like, I'm in Bulgaria filming another movie.
What the hell?
So
makes sense.
And Henry Cavill was like, I'm filming The Witcher, and I'm in London, so unless you want me to film something real fast here in London with one of the crew members, so yeah, it's gonna be interesting to see. Just to see what they're gonna be doing with all the new stuff. I have found interesting that it was like they're also trying to move forward with like those like the darker DC takes, like that Joker movie that came out last fall. I honestly think that like they should go through and they should, instead, because it feels like they kind of have like this weird case of like movie ADHD where they're like, oh yeah, we're gonna do this, and this, and then we're gonna do a Joker movie that doesn't connect to the to our universe at all. I am like, make up your mind. Like, either have all these interconnected movies that, like, it's one of those where a character from a TV show can appear for 20 seconds to say something, and you're like, ah! But, or, like, just to have all these, like, separate movies that don't connect to each other at all. So,
something.
Just to have something. Because
they could easily go the Netflix route and just have more and more exclusive movies pop up. I would even be preferred if Marvel did that with Disney Plus. Be like, okay, let's just have movies here and there.
Yeah,
you lose nothing, you gain a lot.
Well, that's what they're doing with like the Falcon and the WandaVision show, and even
even that. Just go to TV. TV, you have more time to invest in something. You know, within like the first 5 episodes, if you want to continue or not, and you can't say that they didn't spend time developing anybody. So,
well, that's what I kind of like talked about that briefly early on in this episode. But yeah, it's like I would be totally down for like a Under the Red Hood type miniseries. Like we have more time to spend with Batman and his like various Bat family.
I was actually, from what I saw of Gotham, a big fan of the dark style they did with that, and I saw so many people, they didn't want to give it a chance. They thought they saw all these CSI people attached to it, and they're like, oh, it's a cop show. I'm like, not exactly. It's just a gritty retelling.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they kind of do that with like Pennyworth and Gotham, but it's like, I want
Pennyworth is just a fun spy show.
I kind of wish that they like. It's one of those. It's like, I know that they kept Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. away from the Marvel movies like for so long, but I would but you know, my personal favorite moment of Endgame was when they had gone back into time, and so it's like, yeah, we see like older Tony Stark's dad like talk with Jarvis, you know, James D'Arcy from Agent Carter, and I was just like, oh my god! I mean, when my parents are like, why is Meredith screaming about the British butler? What's going on? And Cameron's like, oh, this is that Agent Carter thing. I'm like, yes, it's a cameo! I knew Peggy would show up, but I didn't expect Jarvis, human Jarvis!
So what are the next steps? What's an adaptation that they should do that no one has touched on or thought of doing, you think?
Well, I know they did Under the Red Hood as an animated thing, and I feel kind of biased.
Red Hood, and then like, is there like 2 others that you would just say, why has no one done this? This would be awesome.
Maybe, I don't know if there's any that they haven't already touched, at least in the animated canon yet, but I would kind of be interested to see like I would be kind of interested to see like how they would deal with like Supergirl or Superboy joining the DCU.
Superboy would be interesting.
Like seeing a Young Justice type movie would probably be. I would pay money.
Yes.
To see that.
Yes,
like
absolutely.
I
would actually like to see a DC versus Marvel thing. Go for it.
Oh, that would be incredible, but that would cost like $600
It would cost a shit ton,
$1
and there would be a bunch of ego-headed arguments about who wins, who loses.
Because
it's amazing
Superman
how people
would destroy everybody.
But then again, Who Framed Roger Rabbit did have both Bugs Bunny and Mickey Mouse in the same scene together.
Now you make me wish we could go back into the 80s.
But what's funny about that is I remember it was like, that was one of those weird things where they were able to get them to appear, but it was one of those where it's like the studio, like Disney and Warner Brothers literally went through like the script and they like counted the lines that Bugs Bunny and Mickey Mouse had, and so it was literally.
I'm sure Spielberg played a hand.
Robert Zemeckis had to like, it was one of those. He was like, okay, so literally anytime Mickey Mouse is on screen, Bugs Bunny has to be on screen, and they cannot have more lines than the other one. So it's like if Mickey Mouse suddenly has 5 lines and Bugs Bunny has only 3, we're gonna have to improvise 2 more lines for Bugs Bunny to have.
Jeez.
I don't know what the final count was, but it's literally equal between each character.
And
so
different time. And you said recently they refused the permission to have it be on Disney Plus. How did they resolve that?
Don't know if it's well, I think it's one of those, they kind of...
I haven't ever seen it come on HBO in the last 10 years. I've seen it come on TCM on a rare occasion, but that's it.
I do know the Spider-Man movies are not allowed to stream on Disney Plus because they're
Sony.
It's one of those, they're Sony made and produced, but it's one of those weird things where it's like Sony makes them, but they're distributed by Disney, but there's some clause like in the fine writing saying that it like I think it's gonna be like 2025 before we even see them on Disney Plus. And I hate to say this, but if Disney Plus is still a thing in 2025, so for all we know, all these like streaming networks will go under in like the next year. I don't know.
Why would they go
very,
under?
very weird for me.
Why would they go under? They've invested so much in it. People are streaming endlessly.
Well, things change at the toss of a coin these days. It's insane.
That's a fair point, but I think streaming is going to keep eating up the market. People want to take less risk, and they don't like investing in all these movies which have under 20 million people, and part of it is all the investors and the Wall Street connections on all that other crap too, is like they're all expecting these movies to make 30 million. It's like not everything makes 30 million. Some of it doesn't even make 20 million, but it doesn't mean it's necessarily a bomb if you still made it for 10 million.
True.
It's unrealistic expectations, and hopefully these guys can just stop being jackasses and actually have a civil environment.
Yeah.
It's a business.
Absolutely.
Start treating it that way and let the actors escape into their roles and let the filmmakers have complete control.
I will say this is a kind of like a huge step in terms of just like the fact that it's been barely less than 24 hours since this has been officially announced, and we're just talking about this and everything. This still shows that we haven't even seen the film yet, and it's
we're
not
all
even
pumped up for it.
The film and for miniseries, we don't know which way they're gonna go. Hasn't even started the post-production on it yet.
We were talking earlier, Rob. Do you think they're gonna do like Netflix did with Tarantino's The Hateful Eight, where they have it as a 8-part event?
Well, I know that's one of the options he gave. We could do this as a 4-hour movie, or we could do this as a 6-part miniseries. I think either version would work. I would watch either one. I know Snyder is not opposed to having like these long director's cuts. I know his director's cut, his ultimate cut of Watchmen was 3.5 hours, and I sat there and I love the entire fucking thing. It's the one I prefer to watch, and I
think he's not opposed to it because he saw how like it was how like the Mandalorian came out. Like it was one of those like there's a lot of streaming services that as soon as they launch they just have like
Are you suggesting that Jon Favreau take over every movie from this point on?
Well,
I'm not saying it can't hurt. The dude made Swingers.
What I would talk about throwback. What I'm
of
saying
course
is
I'm
that it's just that he saw how like there were some streaming like Netflix and Amazon, they drop all their episodes at once, but Disney Plus was like they were sitting on the Mandalorian and they knew that if they released it all at once, it was going to be this huge thing, but at the same time
they were going to encourage piracy too.
Well, they already encouraged piracy because when Disney Plus launched, it only launched in like 5 countries.
Oh, jeez.
Like it hadn't even launched in England, Australia, Japan, India. Like they had all those scheduled for like over the course of the next year, and so like in the places where where Disney Plus had launched in, it was like the #1 like stream show, and then in places like Australia, it was the #1 pirated show. And so I think they knew that if they released it all at once, there was going to be this huge buzz, but then it would just kind of disappear. But they knew that The Mandalorian was so good that they were willing to like space it out. They were like, people will turn into something every week if they know it's good. So it was like literally, it was becoming one of those where back at my job, I had to watch it every week. I couldn't watch it like at midnight on Fridays, but like
it was when you get for a rough week.
What happened was like I would go to work on Friday and people would be like, "Did you see The Mandalorian?" I was like, well, back then I went to bed at midnight. Now I don't because of Corona. But I was like, let me tell you that tomorrow. I would come home. I would secretly watch it before y'all would even.
You were that impatient, huh?
Yeah, and then that way the next day I could go to work and they would be. Sometimes I worked on those like the last couple months. I had been doing some Saturday shifts, and they were like, did you see Mandalorian, Meredith? And I was like, yes, and I have opinions, and a lot of them are good. And so I was like giving my boss grief. I'm like, why haven't you seen Baby Yoda yet? Like at one point I offered my boss my Disney Plus information, and he was just like,
just like Rob's pal Ed gave us CBS All Access.
Yeah, it was one of those. I was like,
Thank you, Rob.
I was like, boss, you need to see this shit. He's like, I will give you my password. And he was like, I am already afraid of you, Meredith. I do not need to be in debt to you.
Oh,
and
God.
I was like, I will cut off my left kidney for you, boss, but because I love this job so much, and you're actually a decent human being as a boss. But I understand that. So it's going to be interesting to see what actually happens.
Will there be? Will DC Universe like try it again? Because I mean, looking back at Marvel, how Spider-Man and Blade kind of kicked off the whole Marvel thing before Avengers made the whole MCU canon. Do you think they're going to do that again with Warner Bros., or are they going to just keep doing independent stuff that's kind of connected but its own deal?
I personally think that Warner Brothers is realizing that, you see,
they're being heavy-handed with this.
Yeah, well, I think they kind of felt like they were like a little bit impatient. Like they were like we immediately have to go into Justice League like right away. I mean, well, they realized that with Marvel, while they did do the first film, it was one of those. It's like Marvel had like planned it out. Like they were like, okay, we're gonna do these 5 separate character studies, and then we're gonna do the big team up. It wasn't like Warner Brothers, which is like, oh, here's our Superman movie, and here's our first team up movie. Here's Wonder Woman solo story, and now this is the one where they all team up, and then maybe they'll just have their own separate stuff if we ever get around to it. And I'm like, no, because I think because I even heard that there was like a deleted scene, like apparently Zack Snyder had like planned for all these like it was one of those. I made some notes back when I first kind of heard rumors of a Snyder cut. It was like there was apparently there was a scene filmed that was supposed to be a post-credit scene where like 2 of the Green Lantern Corps members like come down to Earth and they talk with Bruce Wayne. But then I also heard like there was going to be a scene where it was like Bruce Wayne was like at the end of the film they were like, hey Barry, we redesigned your Flash costume, and Ezra Miller was gonna like tear off like this mannequin, and we were just gonna see his reaction to it, and then whenever there was gonna be a Flash film, then we would see the new outfit and be like, oh, this is what Bruce designed for Barry. But of course, the last rumor I heard about the Flash film was that they were thinking about going with Flashpoint.
Who played him in BVS? And
Ezra Miller.
Ezra Miller.
Yeah.
Yeah, we need to talk about Kevin Perks of being a wallflower, and
yeah, that's right.
so it's one of those. They were like, "Oh, we're just gonna go with Flashpoint," and I was like, "You can't start a movie off with Flashpoint." But at the same time, like my own personal like anger towards Flashpoint, I'm like, "Fuck Flashpoint!" But because it's like I saw like I mean. I liked how on the CW shows it like rippled throughout the show, like all the shows of Flashpoint.
Inevitably, they reference it, and it seems like they're trying to do a way better version of it.
Yeah, but
or just for nostalgia's sake, I don't know.
Well, for me, I'm just more like, you know what? We I'm personally, I'm like, if we're starting off with a Flash like solo film, we don't need to start off with Flashpoint because. What we need to do is we need to do like we need to do a character study, kind of like with Aquaman. Like Aquaman was like, I mean, I did have some issues with the Aquaman movie, mainly because like in the Justice League movie, we meet Mera and we see Atlantis, but in the Aquaman movie, spoilers for the listeners who like
Oh
have
my
not,
god, who should have seen it by now.
Aquaman, like they talk about, they're like, oh, you're the guy who helped defeat like Steppenwolf, and then he immediately meets Mera, and he's all like, who are you? What do you mean I'm the king to like Atlantis or something like that? Like so it's like they rebooted it, but at the same time, like they didn't set it before Justice League, they said it after, and I think they should have done with like at least 2 lines of dialogue, like, oh hey, Arthur, do you remember when you were going to fight Steppenwolf and you were so worried that like he was gonna come for Atlantis, you made William Dafoe like erase his memory? And then his half brother decided to take that, and I'm only engaged to him because I wanted to protect the kingdom. We haven't really done anything yet, so it was like I wouldn't mind like 2 lines of exposition like that. Just like, hey, this is a reason why everything seems confusing to people who have seen Justice League. But if you're coming in cold, like you probably have no idea what we're talking about anyway. But yeah. I would have like my problem with the last Star Wars film was like when they explained that one plot twist, they just said it and then they just went off, and I was like, are we not gonna have at least 5 minutes of dialogue to talk about this? Like you just can't drop an atom bomb and not be like, hey, we need to explain what's going on, because that's just lazy storytelling. I'm sorry. That's just like, if you're gonna drop a plot twist that big, at least have the decency to have the characters sit around and talk about it for 5 minutes.
I think everyone should just go back to the format of the original Spider-Man. Just keep ambitious for a sequel, but do a simple just one-off, good versus evil. Like, who's the best villain we got in the whole universe? Let's have the main superhero, after he's found out how to control his powers, fight him at the end of the movie. Boom.
I mean, I did like that about the Wonder Woman movie, was that like the Wonder Woman that we first saw in Batman vs Superman was a completely different character than the one that was introduced in the first Wonder Woman movie. And even the character in 1984 is still going to be a complete different person than she was in Batman vs Superman or Justice League. So I like how it's already been established, like, okay, these are different points in the life, and so you're like, okay, but I mean, at the same time, it's like, I mean, I'm just worried that they're gonna do Flashpoint for the Flash movie, and I don't think I can live in a world where Flashpoint is the first Flash movie. Like, if anything, it's like the direct-to-DVD third movie.
Oh God.
With a different actor, and you could
Was
see
Universal involved?
Exactly.
Rob and I talk about plenty of direct-to-video shit on this show. So
yeah, absolutely.
Please don't send any of these movies direct-to-video. Netflix is already kind of a compromise, blurring the line between DTV and mainstream movies.
Absolutely.
So, Rob, what's a movie that you think they could probably adapt in this whole universe?
I would love to have seen President Lex, where Lex Luthor gets elected president. Yeah, and then
keep
and have that
about how Billy Zane should play him.
Oh,
yeah, and then
he'd be the head of an Amazon company.
Yeah, right. And then you could have that lead into like Batman, Superman, Public Enemies, because I was a big fan of, like, that. Yeah, I would have loved to have seen either of those, like, or like, have like a 2 or 3 part thing where it's like President Lex, Batman v Superman, Batman v Superman on the brain, Batman, Superman, Public Enemies. But one thing I would have loved to have seen though was I would have loved to have seen the Reign of the Superman story arc come to life in live action, because I was a big fan of that when I was a kid. Like, that whole series where after Superman was killed in his battle with Doomsday, you have the 4 Supermen. You have Cyborg Superman, you have Superboy, you have Steel, the John Henry Irons Superman, and then you have the Eradicator Superman all coming in doing, I would have loved to have seen that storyline, because that's one of my favorite storylines, if not my favorite Superman storyline, was the Reign of the Supermen. That would have been that would have been something I would have loved to have seen portrayed in like live action or even a miniseries. the Henry Cavill is perfectly suited for that, especially Cyborg Superman, because he has that kind of like almost like cyborg attribute to him. Like it's like you know his stature.
A
Like he look.
cyborg standalone story would be cool because he's always been kind of a underused character in any
Oh
portrayal.
yeah, yeah. Hank Henshaw, the Cyborg Superman, is absolutely my favorite Superman villain. To be honest, I love Cyborg Superman. Just the whole design. I was so infatuated with Cyborg Superman as a kid. Just his whole look and his whole like plot and all that stuff. So I would love to see him come out um someday or another as like a Superman villain. You know that would probably be like expensive, to do that stuff because it'd probably be all CGI. But
And the
that
minute
was
you
something
say
like
robot, everyone implies that it's got to be all cyberpunk looking, like RoboCop and
yeah
everything. It's like, no, just be
yeah
you. Just be you.
You know what's interesting is that I also did some reading up on like some of because there's gonna be like I think what's gonna happen with Zack Snyder is that he's gonna have the actors come in and do ADR, but I don't think they're gonna film any more scenes. But like one of the storyline scene, like one of the like storyboard scenes that got cut was at the beginning of the film when Martha visits Lois at
yes
the Daily Planet and Lois
yeah
leaves
yeah
the room. Uh, Martha was gonna transform into Martian Manhunter.
Really?
And that was all of a sudden it was like all of a sudden that would make a lot more sense. It was like that's why she's asking all these kind of like invasive questions. That's why it kind of seems a little bit awkward between her and Lois is because this guy has come in and I think that would have been a good tease for like a a Martian Manhunter, but also like if they were to do like you see, I grew up on the Justice League cartoons, and I honestly like. I loved how like the finale of at least the first Justice League series was that it turned out that like Hawk Girl was a spy for like the Hawk
yeah
planet, and I would have loved to like seen something where it was like Hawk Girl like crashes on it, and she initially and
Hot Girl would be an interesting one because that would be kind of another just she's from outer space, right?
yeah,
So
well,
it'd be
yeah
another planetary kind of thing. It could kind of be a fun Superman Flash Gordon type
I
adventure.
would love for like there to be like the plot twist halfway through where it turns out that she was actually like the crash on Earth was intentional and like she would have spent like the first like hour of the movie convincing them that like she's been fleeing from these enemy, and then it turns out that like she had been working for the villain.
So like Sonic the Hedgehog,
a little bit, but
he brings his war to Earth and he fights it out.
But at the same time, it would have been interesting to like at least as I recall from the cartoon, it was like she was like the Hawkman and the people from their planet got there and they're like, oh yes, we're gonna take over Earth now, and Hawk Girl was like, you know what? I actually really like Earth, and I don't think I'm gonna let you like take it over. I'm gonna team up with the Justice League because they're my friends. That would have been like a good plot twist. That would have been 2 good hours, just mindless entertainment in the theater.
Ass kicking.
Jessica Chastain as Hawk Girl. I don't know.
She was supposed to be Painkiller Jane, but I think she pulled out of the project.
Yeah, she's having some. It's one of those. She keeps getting asked for like all the movies, but she's saying no. But you know what would be funny is if after all these years they finally get Keanu Reeves to be in a superhero movie, and it's like
they keep
for,
asking
the
him.
villain
He keeps
as like
saying
Hawkman,
no.
and I'm just like, this is the one he said yes to, not Doctor Strange, which I'm pretty sure is just his life story at this point. Like,
oh god.
So it's gonna be interesting to see.
Okay, so I'm gonna let everyone plug themselves. Rob, where can we find you?
Of course, you could find me on.
As if anyone who hasn't been listening hasn't figured it out.
right. Of course, you can find me on. You can find me as a frequent guest on this show. You can find me as a frequent guest on our friend Candy Allison's The House That Screams podcast. My own my own personal podcast, Big Bearded Brooklyn Bros on the Bridge, a Star Trek podcast, as well as my numerous writings on actionflix.com, ultimateactionmovies.com, and House of Tortured Souls. You can find me on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube as the Cinema Drunkie. And damn, I feel like every time I plug myself, it shit gets longer. And it's like I got so much more shit to plug, and it's like, oh god.
Hey, well, that's life keeps getting longer, or it feels less long.
Yeah, shit, but you can find me on all those things.
You can find me on my personal Twitter is Miss Leigh 2 so it's 2 is just the number, and the same goes for like my Instagram, and I guess I gotta create like professional pages now for all this shit.
Whatever you gotta do.
Whatever I gotta do to be a thing. Anyway, so there you go. Miss
right.
Leigh 2 at Twitter.
Groovy. This was fun.
Yes, it was.
The Jacked Up Review Show can also be followed on Facebook on both the page and the group. Feel free to chat, leave questions, make requests for future episodes. You can also follow us on Instagram and Twitter. Thank you so much for your various support, and we'll continue to entertain the hell out of you. Till then, take care.